Hello and welcome to Your New Jersey. I'm Lisa Marie Falbo. On today's show, we'll learn about a Florham Park mother who has turned tragedy into a platform against drunk driving. But first, the FDA recently approved Leqembi, a new Alzheimer's drug from Eisai, whose U.S. headquarters are based in Nutley. Joining us now to discuss this groundbreaking drug is Michael Irizarry, Eisai's Senior Vice President of Clinical Research. Michael, welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me.
Congratulations on this much anticipated approval. I know for you and everybody at Eisai, this is a hallmark moment for you.
Thank you. It is. And we also feel that this is an important landmark for patients and caregivers of patients who have Alzheimer's disease and early AD, as Leqembi can be a new treatment option for Alzheimer's disease, and also raises hope for other late onset neurodegenerative diseases, that there are opportunities to develop drugs that can slow down the progression of what in the past has been a pretty relentless diseases.
Absolutely. A diagnosis of Alzheimer's is devastating, but it looks like you're giving new hope with this drug. Tell us what it does.
Certainly. Leqembi was approved under the accelerated approval pathway by the FDA, which means that it was approved because it lowers amyloid plaques in the brain. Amyloid plaques being the deposits that are characteristic of Alzheimer's disease. Now, continued approval of Leqembi is based on a confirmatory study that confirms that lowering amyloid plaques has clinical benefit. And we completed our phase 3 study of Leqembi in 1,795 people with early Alzheimer's disease, and showed that that slowed down the rate of progression of disease, so that people spent a longer period of time in the earlier stage of disease. And we submitted that study to the FDA right after we achieved the accelerated approval. The FDA will review that study, and we have the potential to have the full traditional approval later on this year.
If you achieve the full approval, what does that mean for Alzheimer's patients?
With full approval, it becomes easier to talk to funding agencies about the opportunity for reimbursement of Leqembi. Currently, Leqembi is not reimbursed by insurance companies or Medicare, although we continue to have discussions with these groups, presenting them the data from our phase 3 study, so that they can consider reimbursement for Leqembi. This can then be easier if the FDA grants the full traditional approval based on clinical effects of the drug, rather than just the biomarker of amyloid reduction. So after we get the full traditional approval, we'll be discussing in particular with Medicare services to consider reimbursement for Leqembi.
For those that participated in the clinical trial, how has it changed their lifestyle?
So in that clinical trial, we looked at measures of their thinking and also measures of their daily activities. For instance, their ability to participate in community affairs or do work at home, participate in hobbies. And in each of these measures, we showed a slowing of decline, so that people were able to do these activities longer. For instance, we showed that treatment with Leqembi slowed down the progression from the earlier stages of Alzheimer's disease to later stages of Alzheimer's disease. So what this means is that people for a longer period of time can maintain their level of activities, their level of functioning, their level of interaction with their family, friends, and caregivers for a longer period of time than if they were not on treatment. Leqembi is an intravenous medication. It is given every 2 weeks, and in the clinical trials, the results were after 18 months of treatment. And we continue to have an open label extension where people continue to take Leqembi every 2 weeks.
And how long can a patient take the drug for?
Patients can continue to take Leqembi as long as clinicians believe that they're continuing to experience benefit from Leqembi. Once people progress to later stages of disease, then at that point, the continued treatment of Leqembi should be reconsidered by the clinician.
So, with the approval of this drug, how is Eisai using this as an opportunity to educate the public about Alzheimer's disease? I understand it's a very hard disease to diagnose. There's a lot of stigma around it. So, what's Eisai doing for people that are maybe in the dark?
That's a very good point, and there are several aspects of education that will be important with consideration of treatment with Leqembi. So Leqembi was the generic name that we used throughout clinical development. Lecanemab was that kind of generic name. So I tend to know it by that name. Leqembi was the name that it became once it was approved by the FDA. Under the accelerated approval pathway. So first, because the indication is for people that are the earliest stages of Alzheimer's disease, it becomes important to diagnose the disease early. So clinicians and patients and caregivers will need to recognize symptoms earlier, see their clinicians. And then the second part is to confirm that any changes or decline in memory or function is related to Alzheimer's disease. So people will need a test to determine whether they have this amyloid present in the brain. Currently, that test is through a PET scan or through a spinal tap. But we hope that in the future that these can both be replaced by blood tests. The other aspect of education that'll be important is education not only on the efficacy or the potential benefits of lecanemab, but also the potential safety concerns with lecanemab. So lecanemab can have adverse events of infusion-related reactions, so kind of flu-like symptoms, typically with the first injection. That is manageable with medications such as Tylenol, and then also medications that are seen with other treatments that lower amyloid, of instances of either swelling in the brain or small areas of bleeding in the brain. These are typically uncommon and asymptomatic, but they do require monitoring with MRI. So Eisai has established education programs for clinicians that are prescribing lecanemab in terms of identifying and monitoring for these potential safety risks. So for instance, currently people that are prescribed lecanemab will require an MRI at screening and 3 after initiation of treatment.
What was your specific role in getting this product developed, researched, and ultimately approved?
This was really a team effort. So I oversaw the clinical development team that designed the clinical trials, ran the clinical trials. There were additional groups such as the statistics and clinical operations groups that monitor the data and ensure the operational aspects of the clinical trials. So it was really a team effort, as well as the regulatory group that provided the information, aggregated all the information and submitted it to the FDA. So for me, I mainly led the clinical team of physicians and research scientists that developed and ran the clinical trial. But that was only a small portion of the overall effort.
How is news like this company changing? I have to imagine, I mean, Eisai's name was everywhere when this approval came out. It's got to be life-changing.
It's extremely gratifying. Eisai has a human healthcare mission where we intend to really transform the treatment of disease. Eisai had one of the first symptomatic treatments for Alzheimer's disease over 30 years ago with the approval of Aricept. And we've continued to work in this area during that entire time through successes and failures. And with the results of the lecanemab clinical trials and the accelerated approval, it's really gratifying that we've built and learned from all this research and have the opportunity to help patients and caregivers.
Eisai is headquartered in Nutley, New Jersey. Where did this research and the clinical trial happen?
The clinical trial was a global clinical trial in US, Europe, Canada, Japan, China, and South Korea as well. The trial is still ongoing. There's a portion of the trial of the double-blind phase that's still ongoing in China, and then the open label extension for the trial is still ongoing globally.
Very nice. Well, Michael, congratulations once again. We can't wait to hear more. I know there's a lot of people in the Alzheimer's community very excited about this news. Where can people find out more about you and Eisai and Leqembi?
People can learn more about Leqembi at leqembi.com, leqembi.com, regarding availability and other information. And then for Eisai, including our portfolio, that can be found at us.eisai.com.
Michael, thank you so much for coming on here and educating us about Leqembi, and we look forward to more news soon.
Great. Thanks so much. It's been my pleasure.
In April of 2003, the young, vibrant lives of Billy and Ashley Streeter of Florham Park were tragically taken by a drunk driver. Here to tell us how Billy and Ashley's legacy has continued is their mother, Deborah Streeter. Deb, thank you so much for coming on the show today.
Thank you so much, Lisa, for inviting me.
I've known you for many years, and I'm still in awe over the strength that you possess, especially in telling your story. Please tell our audience all about Billy and Ashley and what happened that night.
It just seems like yesterday. Ashley was home for the weekend. She came home from Kutztown because it was her godchild, my nephew's birthday the next day. He was turning 5. And she came home for his party, which was going to be that Sunday. And she was up in bed, so we thought, and Billy's car was in the driveway. We knew that he had gone out for the night, but I thought he was staying in Florham Park. And he had said to me, "Mom, I don't want to go out. I have so much schoolwork to do." He was in Seton Hall Law at the time. He had moved back home from the University of Rhode Island to go to Seton Hall Law. And he would do this very often. He would say, "I don't want to go out." And I would say, "Billy, you have to go out. You have to mix schoolwork with pleasure." But that night, it was a cold, dark, rainy night, April 3rd, actually April 2nd. And I said to him, I just looked outside and I didn't want to say stay home. It's a dark, cold, rainy night. But I said, "Billy, you have to do what you want to do. I can't tell you what to do." So my husband and I went out to dinner. When we came home, both cars were in the driveway. We went to bed, and assuming everything was just as it normally was. And 8 o'clock the next morning, there was a knock on the door. And Bill said, "The police are here." Well, we were good friends with all the police in town. So I came downstairs, and the 3 police that I knew from town were at the front door. And I said, "Oh, come on in, I'll make you coffee." And they said, "No, you have to go sit down." And I said, "I don't want to sit down. Let's go in the kitchen and we'll have coffee." Never thinking in a million years anything could be wrong. And then they told us. And I said, You're wrong. You're absolutely wrong. They're upstairs in their rooms. I'll show you." And I ran up, I opened Ashley's door, and I yelled, "Her sheets are thrown off." And I opened Billy's door and I said, "He never came home. His bed is still made." And then the nightmare began. And we learned that they were killed by on the Garden State Parkway. Billy apparently called Ashley at 2 a.m. and he said he couldn't get into an apartment in Hoboken where he was supposed to spend the night. They wanted to keep partying, and Billy said, I have too much schoolwork to do. I want to get home. I'm going to call my sister. And Ashley got up in the middle of the night and drove down to Hoboken to pick up Billy. And a repeat offender, driving without a license, registration, and insurance, hit Billy and Ashley. And that was the beginning of the end for us, because they were our world, and that was it. And to this day, I think we just deny it. That's how we get through every day, denying that this happened.
My first question after hearing that is, how did you pick yourself up and live life day by day?
I was working for the dean rector of the seminary at Immaculate Conception Seminary at Seton Hall at the time. And if it wasn't for being in that environment, surrounded by all the seminarians and the priests, I don't think I would have made it. The support I had was unbelievable. And the support we received to this day from Billy and Ashley's friends and our friends and family, that's how we make it. It's just unbelievable to this day how people are surrounding us and honoring Billy and Ashley. That's how we make it.
I know in your travels you've probably encountered other parents that are unfortunately dealing with grief. What is your advice to them?
I have met a lot of new people, unfortunately, that are in the position we are. And they're told, some are told to contact us because of what we've been through. I'm honest with them. I tell them it doesn't get easier. It really does not get easier as the time goes on. I have to tell them the truth, and they continue to contact me when they're having a hard time, and I try to talk them through it. I do tell them that as time goes on, you'll learn different ways to cope with it. Try to get away when it's the birthday, the anniversary, holidays, but don't expect that you're going to feel, don't be hard on yourself that you feel down, and just try different ways to cope with it. But I just can't tell them that it's going to be great in a year or 2 or 5 years or 10 years. Honestly, it gets harder as the time goes on, because you wonder, where will they be in 5 years and 10 years? What would they have been doing? What would my life have been like? What did they miss out on? And I'm honest, and I truly think they appreciate it.
I think the most extraordinary part of this story is not only the support that you've continued to be given for now almost 20 years this year, and all the different ways that you have picked yourself up and spread your message throughout the community, but you actually made news in forgiving the person who did this. How did you find it within yourself to do that?
That was the day of the hearing. And we were in a room with some of our family and friends, and the bailiff knocked on the door, and he said, Mr. and Mrs. Streeter, the father would like to speak with you. And we did not hesitate. We looked at each other and we walked out of the door, and his father was standing there. And he said, please forgive my son. And he was actually crying, and we just hugged him and we cried and we said, we do forgive your son. We're sure your son did not go out with the intentions that night to kill 2 children. And we know Billy and Ashley, that's exactly what they would want us to do, because that was Billy and Ashley. They forgave everyone. They were kind. They had the biggest hearts, and we were doing it for Billy and Ashley. And he was so appreciative, and we do forgive him. We know that he did not intend to do that. He could have made the right decision that night. He could have not gotten into that car, but he did not. So how could we hold a grudge? A grudge would only hurt us. And we know it would hurt Billy and Ashley if we did not forgive him. So we feel so much better that we did that. And that's what has to be done.
How have others in the community, and there's been so many of those, worked to keep Billy and Ashley's memory alive?
There isn't a day that I don't receive something pertaining to Billy or Ashley. After all this time, it's just unbelievable. The community just rallies around us. The friends are constantly in touch with us. Even Billy's fraternity brothers that he only knew for 4 years have kept in touch with us. It's just amazing. So that's why it seems like it just happens, because everybody, it's not only raw and real for us now, it's still raw for their friends. It's unbelievable. Every year, we go to Hanover Park and Clifton. We've been doing it right from day one. We started 6 weeks after this, the accident. And every other year now, Madison names their 15, it's called Every 15 Minutes. It's a 2-day program, and it's every other year, and they dedicate it to Billy and Ashley. It's an amazing program. And we go to other high schools that request us. And we did that starting 6 weeks after the accident. We did it, it was a 6-week program, and we did it for 8 years. But that program now has done away with, unfortunately, because it was a very good program. We received so many feedbacks from parents who attended the classes with their children. And I feel it's very important for awareness. And that's what keeps us going, speaking to children and hoping that we do help someone along the way that might have gotten in that car that night when they were drinking, or getting into a car with other children that may have been drinking, and they might be the innocent victim sitting in that car. To date, we have given 121 scholarships because of Gloria setting up the Memorial Fund. Most of the proceeds now come from the 5K race that the JCs have in town. And Marissa Forte, one of the girls that attended Hanover Park, started the Memorial Fund 5K fund race. And when she set up that race, when she went to Borough Hall that night, the JCs were there, and they asked if they could join Billy and Ashley's race, combine it with their 5K race. It started out with 100 people, and it's up to over 1,500 people now. The Girls on the Run joined it, and it's just an unbelievable race. 2 of the girls, Angela, who was one of the cheerleaders with Ashley on Hanover Park's team, and Amy Rega, who was also a cheerleader, but a few years behind Ashley, they established Ashley Streeter Award, and they give it out to, it's a K through 8 team. It's Hanover Park, Hanover and Florham Park, and they give it to an 8th grader who exhibits kindness and compassion. There's a classroom dedicated by the alums at Seton Hall and Billy's graduating class. And a plaque hangs outside the classroom and on the podium where the professor stands. It's amazing what the schools still do for Billy and Ashley, each and every school where the award is given.
Where can people find out more about you?
We have a website. It's www.bemoreforba.com.
Deb, once again, thank you so much for coming on here and sharing your story. I only wish the best of everything for you in the future.
Thank you, Lisa, so much.
Thank you for watching Your New Jersey. I'm Lisa Marie Falbo. We'll see you back here next week.